This session is on ICTs for green growth and sustainable development. It is about having economic development and environmental sustainability reinforcing each other in a new way to growth. The objectives of the session are specifically to talk about green growth and why it is important, and to provide an overview of ICT applications that enable green growth. So let's begin by asking again, what is green growth? Green growth is a paradigm. It encourages societies to pursue economic growth and development without sacrificing the environment, biodiversity, or the natural resource base. It builds upon the ideas of sustainable development. So now, why do we need to consider green growth? Why do the people of Asia Pacific need to think about green growth? The answer lies in the manner of our current growth using up our natural resources. By the start of the 21st century, this century, our region annually uses 35 billion tons, or 60% of the material that is consumed around the world. 60% of that consumption is in the Asia Pacific. We use 3 times the resource input of the rest of the world for every 1 unit of gross domestic product that we produce. That means that we are inefficient. In order to produce 1 unit of economic growth, we need 3 times as much resources than other regions need. Third, we use up energy faster than the rest of the world. Fourth, we have increased our greenhouse gas emissions from 14.5 billion tons in 1990 to 19.5 billion tons in 2005, or a 5 billion increase. Next, we used 2,383,000,000,000 cubic meters of water for agriculture, for manufacturing, and for household consumption in 2000. And this represents 63% of global water consumption. We have an average water use of 644 cubic meters per capita, whereas the world average is less at 619 cubic meters. And North and Central Asia are the largest water user at 1,011 cubic meters of water per person. So this means we are inefficient in our use of natural resources. So therefore, the identified critical challenges to sustaining development are the following. First, that resource constraints are threatening future growth. In other words, we've grown this much, but we can't grow any further because we're running out of the resources that will fuel it. Next, climate change threatens what we have already gained, so this may be even reduced. And third, we need to improve the gap between ecological efficiency and economic efficiency. So if this is our economic efficiency, our ecological efficiency may be just this much. So we need to raise this up, or we need to lower this down so that they match. Yeah, we match our resource consumption or ecological efficiency with the amount that it produces economically. One should not be at the disbenefit to the other. So now, the countries of the region have met and have started discussing the issue. For example, at the 5th Ministerial Conference on Environment and Development in 2005 in Seoul. Here we've started the discussions of green growth as a strategy for development. And then the UN APCICT, or the United Nations Economic Social Commission of the Asia Pacific, have gotten a mandate to promote green growth as a strategy to achieve sustainable development. The Seoul Initiative on Environmentally Sustainable Economic Growth was written out. And now there are other regional initiatives of the Asian Development Bank, of the UN Environmental Program, and of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations that followed in turn. The UN APCICT, for example, has produced a guide for policymakers on low-carbon green growth, a roadmap that helps improve the quality of growth and maximize net growth, and gives pointers on how the gap between economic and ecological efficiencies may be closed. And it encourages countries to plan and design eco-efficient infrastructure, to turn green into a business opportunity, and to formulate and implement low-carbon development strategies. So where's ICT in all of this? What is the role of ICTs in achieving green growth? ICTs allow the linkages, the communication, and it helps us create control systems for monitoring growth. It looks at smart initiatives like smart grids, smart buildings, smart transport and logistics. And these can be part of the technologies that implement green growth ideas. ICTs help us promote learning about the impacts of our energy use and helps us think about ways to improve our energy use consequently. And finally, ICTs also need to look at itself as a sector and think about green computing, which we had mentioned in an earlier session. So there are some examples from around the region that show that countries are now trying new things. They are experimenting to find green growth strategies that fit for them. And I will go through a series of case studies that demonstrate this. So in Bhutan, they are creating their first IT park in the capital Thimphu. And this IT park is like any other IT park, coming with business incentives to attract companies and investors to locate there. But what is unique about the park is that it capitalizes Bhutan's abundant hydroelectric resources to operate the center so that it is using cheaper green power for giving the electricity for the data center. Furthermore, since Bhutan is relatively cool compared to most countries, they need relatively less power to keep the temperature down in the center. So it's maximizing both the opportunity for new investment as well as some of its natural climatic characteristics to promote technology in an IT park. Our second case study features how observation satellites were used to plan for low-emission, climate-resilient development in Maldives. So they are intending to build resilient communities, and to do this, they need to be able to identify who are the vulnerable populations and what are the vulnerable ecosystems in Maldives. So they use satellite images and sensors, as well as climate change risk data and information, and combine them to identify these vulnerable populations and ecosystems. And then they use this for planning their development strategy. They're also using satellites for emissions assessment and monitoring, so that any development that happens in Maldives will be low emission and climate resilient combination. A third case study comes from Turkmenistan and their explorations into solar energy. Turkmenistan is blessed with 7.4 hours of sunshine per day. That's their average amount of sunshine that they receive on a day. And so the government has decided to use this as a way of developing solar power as a strategic priority for the country, to use green energy to enable sustainable development. And therefore, it needs to invest in the infrastructure and technical skills required to run a solar-powered facility. Now, this infrastructure and technical know-how are not yet available in Turkmenistan. So what they do is that they are using an ICT-driven network to promote technical exchange and scientific cooperation between Turkmenistan and Europe, where there are already institutes that are ahead in harvesting solar power. And so they are using a solar pavilion as a test bed for the sunshine that they receive and the amount of electricity they can generate. And then scientists in both Turkmenistan and Europe can analyze the amount of data that they're receiving, and then amount of solar radiation they're receiving, and then they can improve on the design of the solar energy system together. Our next case study is about China's smart grid development project. So the State Grid Cooperation of China has a project that will be fully implemented by 2020 that will use a combination of traditional electricity supply with wind power and hydropower. And it is encouraging consumers to change their consumption of power by using more electricity vehicles and hybrid vehicles. And they're even constructing charging stations so that people with electric cars can recharge their cars there. At the same time, they're looking at the challenges of providing electricity to rural areas that are very far from the national grid. And so they're looking at mini grids or smaller grids and using ICTs to control those smaller grids so that they can be supplied with a reliable source of electricity. So in this project, ICT is used to make everything efficient and integrated. So this is a new innovation to providing electricity that's trying to capitalize on the latest developments in ICTs. In Korea, Jeju also has a renewable energy microgrid where they are using an ICT network to monitor power generation and to measure the climate in order to ensure a reliable source of renewable energy. And this smart grid is still being developed. It was set up in 2009 as a test bed, and then they are currently scaling up, and it will be available nationwide according to plan by the year 2030. Okay, so this is a state-of-the-art solution to addressing both climate change and improving the efficiency of energy production and distribution. And now we come to an application of ICTs for promoting green growth and green procurement in Vietnam. Here, the government used ICTs to make their public procurement process of obtaining goods and services that it needs on an electronic system. And this way, they're able to improve their efficiency as well as promote transparency in a very public process. But also, they're promoting using life cycle cost calculation rather than just the cost of the good or the service as a basis for selecting which good or service it will acquire for government. So this is a very interesting way of looking at both e-government as well as green government. Our last case study comes from Cebu City, which shows how it is tackling the increase in demand for clean water by improving its treatment and reuse of stormwater. It has an integrated stormwater management system that uses computers heavily to monitor, analyze, and control rainfall and stormwater recycling. So finally, we have heard many applications of looking at development in a new way, and all of them use ICT. So in terms of the policy considerations, we suggest that countries consider developing an ICT-based climate change mitigation strategy. And in this strategy, to identify and assess the opportunities for ICTs very actively on mitigating climate change, but also to think about how ICTs can be used for adapting to climate change. This way, we can reduce our environmental impact, energy use, and emission of greenhouse gases. At the same time, we can promote economic, human, and social development for all. So I hope that you have heard some interesting and new ideas here in this session on green growth, and that you can consider how ICTs can be a very focal part of it.